They came expecting to enslave a world of soft-skinned primates. Instead, they found a planet that devoured armies whole. Earth was not just defended by humans, it was defended by itself. Before we dive in, if you enjoy stories where humanity rises against impossible odds, make sure to like this video, subscribe, and join our growing community of listeners. Every click helps bring more tales like this to life. Now let's return to the invasion and the nightmare that followed. The Zaltharian Empire had crushed a dozen star systems without pause. Their fleets blotted out suns. Their soldiers marched across alien continents like living storms. To them, Earth was nothing but a minor outpost of organic life, a resource-rich planet sitting unguarded on the galactic frontier. The fleet descended in silence, thousands of ships slipping through the upper atmosphere. Their commanders expected one thing: swift capitulation. Human communications had already been intercepted. Their defense satellites turned to slag in orbit. The Empire considered the battle won before it even began. But conquest was never that simple on Earth. The first wave of dropships landed in what humans called the Amazon Basin. Soldiers stepped out in gleaming armor, weapons humming with captured energy. They had fought on volcanic moons, on frozen worlds, on deserts with atmospheres of acid, but nothing had prepared them for this. The air itself felt hostile, wet, heavy, alive. The soldiers' breathing masks hissed as they filtered spores and strange particles. The trees towered over them, shadows swallowing whole platoons. Something screamed in the distance, not mechanical, not natural, but ancient. Within minutes, they began losing contact. The forest swallowed their transmissions. Their scanners returned false images, shadows moving where nothing lived. And then the attacks began, not from humans, but from the jungle itself. Massive snakes crushed armored troops before they could fire. Ant colonies swarmed into exosuits, chewing through wiring and flesh alike. Poisoned thorns pierced gaps in armor. Even the rain turned against them, acidic in ways they could not understand, burning eyes, corroding weapons. By the time the commanders realized what was happening, half of the first wave was gone, and somewhere deep in the canopy, unseen eyes were watching. Humans. Small groups, hunters, farmers, ex-soldiers, armed with little more than old rifles, knives, and cunning. They didn't strike head-on. They let Earth fight for them, weaving themselves into the storm of nature that shredded the invaders. The Zaltharian Empire had expected obedience. Instead, they found resistance in every drop of rain, every bite of insect, every rustle in the leaves. For the first time in generations, the invaders hesitated. And Earth had only just begun. The Zaltharian commanders were not accustomed to confusion. Their empire stretched across 100 systems, built on flawless logistics and absolute obedience. But Earth fractured their order within hours. Reports from the Amazon front were scrambled, inconsistent, and unbelievable. A battalion lost to plant interference. Another vanished. Last transmission cut short by something that sounded like screaming. Commanders at orbit dismissed them as incompetence. Surely a primitive jungle couldn't cripple the galaxy's most powerful army. So they launched more landings. North America, Europe, Africa, Asia. Armored divisions fell from the skies like metallic rain, their carriers touching down in plains, deserts, forests, and cities. Each landing force was confident. Each was destroyed in ways the Empire had never witnessed. In Africa, soldiers marched across savanna grasslands, only for their sensor drones to go haywire. Herds of animals stampeded with unnatural coordination, as if guided by an unseen hand. Tanks were flipped. Roops scattered. And when the dust cleared, the humans struck. Farmers with hunting rifles, children with makeshift traps, old men carrying Molotov cocktails. In the frozen north, the invaders encountered cold beyond calculation. Their heating systems strained, cracked, failed. Ice winds ripped through armor like knives. Entire regiments froze solid, their gleaming war machines turned into frozen monuments under the aurora sky. In Asia, they tried to capture cities, but the cities themselves turned against them. Streets choked their convoys, alleyways funneled them into kill zones. Civilians vanished underground, then reappeared behind enemy lines, striking like ghosts. Bridges collapsed, tunnels flooded, skyscrapers toppled in perfect, precise demolitions. Everywhere they landed, the story was the same. The land itself seemed hostile, and humans knew how to weaponize it. By the second week, the Empire's high command ordered a full analysis. Scientists ran atmospheric scans, geological readings, biosphere reports. Their conclusions were unsettling. Earth was wrong. Its weather patterns were too violent, shifting with no warning. Its ecosystems operated on a scale of aggression unseen in known space. Its animals displayed intelligence, unnatural intelligence, and the humans, primitive by galactic standards, fit seamlessly into the chaos, bending it, shaping it, and unleashing it upon their enemies. But one finding disturbed them most of all: energy spikes, inexplicable bursts of electromagnetic fury, storms that rose from clear skies, earthquakes not triggered by tectonic pressure, entire forests moving, yes, moving, when no known force could explain it. The scientists whispered a forbidden thought. Perhaps the humans weren't fighting alone. Perhaps the planet itself was alive. The first time the Zaltharian admitted to fear, it came not from a battle, but from silence. An armored column of nearly 10,000 marched into the Amazon basin, armed with flamethrowers and seismic weapons meant to tame the forest. Hours later, the transmissions cut off. No distress calls, no combat chatter, not even static. Just a void. When search drones arrived, the jungle had already consumed everything. Metal melted into the soil, bones woven into roots, vines draped over abandoned weapons as if nature itself had claimed victory. Not a single Zaltharian body remained intact. Some commanders suggested desertion, others whispered a darker truth: the jungle had eaten them alive. And then the storms began. Over Europe, skies boiled black. Lightning struck with precision, disabling aerial fleets one by one. Not random lightning, targeted. Every bolt found engines, weapon cores, or command towers. Scientists argued it was coincidence. Generals saw it for what it was, the atmosphere itself rejecting them. Reports poured in from across the globe. In Australia, sand dunes moved overnight, swallowing armored walkers whole. In Africa, rivers reversed their flow, drowning encampments. In the Pacific, an entire fleet disappeared beneath waves that rose like a wall, then fell back into calm waters. The Empire had crushed hundreds of worlds before. Every planet they conquered bent beneath their technology. But here, the opposite was true. The longer they stayed, the more Earth adapted, as if it learned their strategies and answered with its own. The humans noticed it too. Guerrilla fighters reported storms shielding their retreats, wolves hunting alongside them, and forests opening paths for their escape. At first they thought it was luck. Then they began to wonder, was the planet helping them? High Command convened an emergency summit aboard the orbital dreadnought Imperium Ascendant. Generals argued for more troops, more weapons, overwhelming force. Scientists countered with growing evidence that force itself only provoked Earth into escalating responses. Finally, an admiral slammed his clawed hand on the table. "This world is cursed," he spat. "No planet resists us. No planet fights back. Yet here we bleed. Perhaps the humans are not our enemy at all. Perhaps the enemy is the planet itself." The room fell into silence. For the first time in centuries, the Empire faced a truth it had no strategy for. They weren't fighting a species. They were fighting a world. The Empire's pride could not allow retreat. Not yet. The generals argued that Earth was only a rock. Dangerous, yes, but still a rock. They had conquered worlds with acidic seas. Worlds with skies of fire, worlds where gravity crushed lesser species flat. "This planet cannot think," one general declared. "It only reacts. Break it harder, and it will break apart." So the Empire escalated. They deployed atmospheric burners, machines that bled fire into the sky, stripping oxygen and drying rivers to ash. They unleashed planet drills, titanic engines meant to pierce into Earth's crust and destabilize tectonic plates. And from orbit they brought the most dreaded of their weapons, the Oblivion Net, a curtain of satellites designed to smother a world in darkness, cutting off its light and heat. But Earth did not break. It answered. The burners ignited storms so fierce they twisted into hurricane firestorms, spiraling out of control and turning entire invasion zones into infernos that devoured alien encampments first. The drills triggered volcanic fury, but not against humanity. Magma burst upward beneath the alien fortresses, consuming their machines in rivers of fire. And when the net unfurled across the sky, the planet fought back in silence. Within days, the satellites began to fall, not shot down, but struck by meteors, fragments of space rock drawn in on improbable trajectories, as though the planet had borrowed the cosmos as a weapon. The humans watched in awe. For them, this was no longer just survival, it was revelation. Preachers whispered of divine wrath. Soldiers called it the spirit of Earth. Scientists tried to measure it, but every new data point only deepened the mystery. Somehow, the planet was choosing sides, and it was not choosing the Empire. In South America, resistance fighters noticed jaguars prowling near alien patrols, always vanishing before humans could be targeted. In Siberia, blizzards smothered invaders while leaving nearby villages untouched. In the deserts, mirages led alien tanks into canyons they could never escape. The Empire, growing desperate, did what it always did when resistance proved stubborn. It targeted the civilians. Entire cities were marked for annihilation. Weapons capable of vaporizing millions were readied, their warheads glowing like dying suns. But before the first could fire, the Empire's weapon crews reported a problem. The launch platforms sank. Concrete fractured. Steel cracked. Beneath their feet, the ground itself opened, dragging their doomsday weapons into endless pits of mud and stone. What little they salvaged was corroded, ruined, eaten by the very soil they stood upon. For the first time in history, the Empire's most dreaded weapons had failed not because of sabotage, not because of enemy fire, but because the world itself had said no. And above the chaos, humanity realized something terrifying. If Earth was protecting them, it was also testing them. Because if the planet could turn against the invaders, it could just as easily turn against its children. The alien empire had never known fear like this. In their long history, they had subdued hundreds of worlds. Species bent the knee. Nature was crushed under their science. Planets yielded their riches to imperial hands. But Earth was different. Earth was hostile, not passively, actively. Every forest, every storm, every stone seemed to resist. And when their greatest weapons failed, the Empire's confidence began to splinter. In command halls, generals shouted at each other. Some demanded retreat, calling Earth cursed and unworthy of blood. Others demanded escalation. If the planet resisted, then they would simply strip it to atoms, reducing it to rubble. But the Empire's emperor refused retreat. No rock resists the Empire of Suns. His command was clear: fight or die. Yet his soldiers were already dying faster than replacements could arrive. In the field, alien infantry whispered of cursed lands. Some refused to enter forests, claiming they could hear trees whispering threats. Others swore the rivers themselves dragged them under, pulling at their armor until it split like tin. Whole platoons deserted, fleeing into space with stolen transports rather than set foot on the planet again. Paranoia spread like wildfire. The soldiers turned on each other, accusing comrades of sabotage whenever machines failed. But it was not sabotage. It was Earth itself, crops spoiled in their hands. Electronics sparked to death in perfect unison. Armored vehicles simply refused to start, their engines choked with grit as if the dirt itself had crept inside. Meanwhile, humanity watched from the shadows. Where the aliens fractured, humans grew stronger. Bands of survivors became armies. Farmers and mechanics became tacticians, learning to work with the strange new power of the Earth. They noticed patterns, storms that shielded their movements, beasts that targeted invaders but not them, landslides that fell only when enemy tanks crossed the ridges. The question spread among them like wildfire. Was Earth truly alive? Some said yes, that the planet itself had awakened, a guardian spirit rising to defend its children. Others said no, that something older, something beyond comprehension, was manipulating reality through Earth as its vessel. But the most terrifying thought of all was whispered only in hushed tones. What if it has always been alive, and only now, when pushed to the edge, has it chosen to reveal itself? The aliens could not hear these whispers. They were too busy trying to survive their own unraveling empire. Communications faltered. Supply fleets stopped answering. Rumors spread of uprisings on other worlds, rebellions inspired by Earth's defiance. The empire had come to conquer a single planet. Instead, it had infected itself with doubt. And humans, for the first time in living memory, felt the balance of power shift. Not because of weapons, not because of numbers, but because Earth itself was on their side. Yet even as victory seemed closer, some humans began to ask a darker question. If Earth can fight for us, can it also decide it doesn't need us at all? The deeper the war dragged on, the more impossible it became to deny. Earth was no ordinary battlefield. For humanity, survival had turned into something far stranger than resistance. Farmers in the Midwest reported crops sprouting overnight, enough to feed hundreds. Herders in the Andes swore their animals grew stronger, wilder, and immune to alien weapons. Hunters in Siberia claimed the forests guided them, every trail leading to alien camps waiting to be ambushed. The stories spread, impossible to verify, yet impossible to ignore. Scientists, once silenced by the chaos of invasion, returned with notebooks in trembling hands. They began testing soil samples, plant structures, weather anomalies. What they found defied every law they thought they understood. Weather systems that changed direction in seconds, plants that grew in patterns resembling signals, soil bacteria that clustered into shapes like letters. It was as if the Earth was trying to speak. Human leaders argued in basements and bunkers. Was this divine? A natural planetary defense mechanism? Or something far older, using the planet as its vessel? Some believed it was Gaia itself, the ancient myth made real. Others warned that if Earth was alive, then it was not our servant. It was not even our ally. It was something else. Yet curiosity pushed them forward. Experiments began. They tested coded signals, planting patterns in fields, burning symbols into grass, arranging stones in spirals. And sometimes, just sometimes, the planet seemed to answer, storms forming in response, roots growing along geometric lines, birds flocking in shapes that matched human symbols. The whispers grew louder. Earth is speaking. But what does it want? Meanwhile, the alien empire reeled on the edge of collapse. Commanders no longer trusted their maps because the ground shifted, no longer trusted their drones because the skies devoured them, no longer trusted their ships because storms ripped them from the sky with unnatural precision. Desperation set in. The Emperor ordered a final plan to scorch the Earth clean. If the planet resisted them, then they would burn it until nothing remained. Orbital weapons were prepared, massive kinetic bombardments designed to erase continents. But the aliens underestimated just how far Earth would go to defend itself. When the first weapons were deployed, they never reached their targets. Entire orbital stations lost power as if drained by some unseen force. Ships were pulled into sudden, impossible gravity wells that appeared out of nowhere. Moons shifted ever so slightly, their orbits tugged as if by an invisible hand. Something was moving the heavens themselves. Down on the ground, humanity could feel it in their bones. A pressure, a weight, a resonance in the very air. The planet was stirring deeper now, beyond storms and soil and beasts. It was reaching upward, outward, into the void itself. The aliens realized too late that they were not fighting humans. They were not even fighting Earth. They were fighting something far larger. And humanity, caught between terror and awe, stood in the center, asking the most dangerous question of all. If we can talk to the Earth, what happens when it finally answers? The first clear response came not to generals, nor scientists, nor presidents hiding underground. It came to a farmer. Her name was Ellen Crawford, and she lived alone in the cracked farmlands of Kansas. Her neighbors had fled long ago, but she stayed, tending what little crops still grew between scorch marks left by orbital fire. One evening, after another day spent weeding a field that should have been long dead, she noticed the stalks of corn bending, not to wind, not to weight, but to pattern. They leaned until the rows curved, spiraling inward, and when Ellen stood back, what she saw was not random. It was language, a circle, then another inside it, then lines radiating outward. Days later, when scientists heard her story and saw the photos, their jaws tightened. They had seen similar shapes in satellite recordings of storms, in the way rivers shifted course overnight, even in the paths of migrating birds. The Earth wasn't just reacting, it was coordinating. Ellen's spiral became the Rosetta Stone. Teams around the world scrambled to copy it. They plowed soil in patterns, drew symbols on beaches, planted crops in circles, and when they did, sometimes the planet answered back. Rain would fall only on fields marked in the spiral. Forests would bloom where lines were carved. Winds would trace the symbols high above in drifting clouds. It was undeniable now. Earth was not just alive. It was trying to communicate. But with words came danger. Because the aliens were listening too. They intercepted broadcasts of the human experiments, translated the reports, and came to a single, horrifying conclusion. Earth itself was a conscious planetary intelligence, and it had chosen humanity as its voice. If Earth could guide humans, arm them with storms and beasts and shifting terrain, then the Empire's defeat was not just likely, it was inevitable. So they launched their last desperate plan. Not conquest, not occupation, but extinction. If the humans were Earth's chosen children, then the only way to break the planet's will was to erase them completely. Mass drivers were aimed. Bioplagues were prepared. The largest fleet ever assembled ignited its engines, not to fight battles on the ground, but to erase humanity from existence before Earth itself could rise fully awake. And as the skies darkened with fire, the spirals spread across the globe. Fields, forests, deserts, rivers, all etching themselves with the same pattern, glowing faintly as if lit from beneath. Humanity looked up, united in fear and wonder, and whispered the same question on every trembling breath. Is this Earth's answer? The alien armada spread across the sky like a wound. Thousands of ships, each bristling with weapons, eclipsed the stars. Their plan was no longer to rule, but to annihilate. Humanity would be ashes, and with it, Earth's strange will would be silenced forever. Cities trembled as the fleets prepared their barrage. Yet before the first volley could strike, the planet itself answered. It began with the ground. Across continents, fissures split open, not from bombs, not from tectonic fault lines, but in precise geometric shapes. Spirals, circles, arcs, like writing too vast for human eyes to grasp at once. Molten light poured from them, rivers of fire that traced letters across mountains and valleys. Then came the storms. From the Atlantic to the Pacific, cyclones rose in perfect symmetry. Lightning carved runes in the sky, flashes repeating in deliberate rhythm. To the aliens, watching through scanners and sensors, it was unmistakable. A code, not random weather, but language, broadcast across the heavens in bolts of pure energy. For the first time in their empire's long history, the invaders felt something they could not classify with data or weapons. They felt the weight of being unwelcome. Earth was no battlefield. Earth was a being. The fleet tried to fire anyway. Great cannons opened, hurling kinetic slugs the size of mountains. But before they could land, the skies bent. Clouds solidified into barriers. Winds hardened into walls of pressure. The projectiles slowed, shattered, or were redirected into empty seas. Then the wildlife joined. From the jungles, armies of creatures poured, not directed by human command, but driven by something deeper. Birds filled the air in living swarms, darkening the daylight. Whales rose in oceans, striking alien submarines with thunderous force. Even insects erupted in numbers beyond counting, clogging machinery, suffocating engines. The aliens had come expecting prey. Instead, they were drowning in an endless tide of the planet's fury. On the ground, humans did not fight alone anymore. They were no longer the weak species cornered and overrun. They were the chosen instruments of something far older, far greater. Guns fired alongside hurricanes. Trenches were dug by human hands, then reinforced by roots that grew overnight into walls. Soldiers fought shoulder to shoulder with the planet itself. It was not a war. It was exorcism. For the first time, the alien empire realized the truth too late. They had not invaded a world, they had trespassed upon a mind. And as their fleets burned, as storms ripped apart their command ships, as forests rose like claws from the ground to consume their machines, a single signal pulsed through every human radio, every cracked phone, every still glowing screen. We are awake. The alien empire had once stretched across 1,000 worlds. Every planet they conquered bent, broke, and submitted. But Earth was rewriting the rules. Their fleets, once vast and unstoppable, were splintered. Command ships fell in silence, ripped from orbit by storms that should not exist. Ocean waves rose like walls, dragging carriers down into black depths. Entire divisions vanished overnight, swallowed by forests that grew back over their ruins as if to erase the trespass completely. Yet the true terror wasn't destruction. It was contagion. Reports began to spread among the survivors. Their broadcasts, desperate for answers, revealed a horror unthinkable to an empire built on domination. On colonies orbiting distant suns, on worlds hundreds of light years away, strange things were happening. Winds shifted where no winds had ever blown. Crops grew in patterns, spiraling like Earth's storms. Forests in alien soil began whispering, carrying sounds not made by any creature. Their scanners confirmed it. The signature matched Earth's impossible energy. The awakening was no longer confined to a single world. Humanity had always thought of Earth as home, as soil, as sky. But what if it was more than that? What if consciousness, once stirred, could ripple outward like waves? The Empire tried to regroup. They summoned reinforcements, entire legions from other stars. Armadas converged, bristling with weapons forged to extinguish civilizations. Their plan was simple: bombard Earth until nothing remained but dust. But as they approached, their ships began failing. Not from human sabotage, not from resistance fire. Their own systems, navigation, propulsion, life support, turned against them. Engines locked, doors sealed, power drained, as if swallowed into nothing. It wasn't sabotage. It wasn't an attack. It was infection. Earth's will had slipped inside their technology, twisting it. Circuits pulsed with rhythms like heartbeats. Screens flashed patterns identical to lightning storms on Earth. Even metal itself began to corrode in strange shapes, as though the universe itself was siding with the world that had been awakened. On the ground, humans began to notice changes too. Weapons grew warm in their hands, guiding their aim as if aware. Vehicles repaired themselves overnight, patched with vines that hardened like steel. Soldiers, once exhausted, felt energy flow through them when their boots touched soil, as though the ground itself lent them strength. It was no longer humanity defending Earth. It was Earth raising humanity to stand beside it. And somewhere in the wreckage of the alien fleet, a lone transmission pulsed outward across the stars. It wasn't human. It wasn't alien. It was the planet itself, reaching further than its skies had ever reached before. We are not prey. We are not weak. We are awake. Come closer, and you will join us. The alien empire had believed the battle was contained. They thought Earth was a stubborn outlier, a planet with strange quirks and inconveniently fierce natives. What they didn't understand was that something far larger was moving beneath the surface. When Earth's transmission went out, it wasn't just noise. It wasn't random interference. It was language. Not a language built for mouths or voices, but for skies, oceans, and stars. A resonance that only living things could feel. Across the galaxy, species that had never seen Earth before suddenly shivered. Hunters froze as their prey vanished into the trees. Miners dropped tools, swearing the rock beneath them breathed. Children woke from dreams they couldn't explain. Dreams of green forests, roaring storms, endless waves, and the smell of rain. The Empire panicked. They jammed signals, deployed psychic dampeners, unleashed their greatest scientists. But nothing worked. Earth's message was not carried by simple radio or quantum pulses. It spread the way roots spread through soil, the way tides spread across a shore. Wherever life existed, the echo followed. And the more the Empire tried to suppress it, the worse it grew. On their ships, alien soldiers reported hearing whispers in languages they didn't know, but understood perfectly. Their weapons faltered in their hands, not broken, but hesitant, like animals refusing to obey. Meanwhile, humans on Earth began noticing something stranger still. Dreams. The same dreams, shared across continents. Soldiers on the front lines dreamed of oceans they'd never seen, of mountain peaks far from their homes. Farmers dreamed of deserts blooming with sudden life. Children dreamed of stars flickering like fireflies. And when they woke, the things they had dreamed began to happen. Rain fell where it was needed most. Fields ripened overnight. Wounded men and women stood, their injuries closing as if the earth itself had refused to let them fall. The line between miracle and weapon blurred. The aliens called it infection. The humans called it home. But the truth was becoming undeniable. Earth was teaching, not just defending itself, but showing humanity what it could be if it listened. For the first time, human leaders stopped asking how to survive the invasion. Instead, they began asking a far more dangerous question. If Earth itself could rise as an ally, what else could it teach them to do? The Empire's admirals watched in terror as their fleets, once meant to bombard the planet into dust, now circled helplessly, trapped in Earth's gravity like insects in a web. The more they struggled, the tighter the pull became. And in the silence between broken transmissions, one chilling reality echoed through every level of their empire. This was not a war. It was an awakening. The alien empire thought Earth's resistance was a last gasp. They believed that if they pressed harder, crushed cities faster, and silenced transmissions, the humans would break. But the harder they struck, the faster Earth responded, and the more humans began to change. At first, the differences were small. Soldiers on the battlefield didn't tire as quickly. Farmers could feel the weather coming days before it arrived. Healers placed their hands on wounds and somehow knew which herbs or treatments would work best. Then, it grew stranger. Whole groups of people dreamed the same dream and woke with the same knowledge. How to build stronger shelters, how to navigate forests without a map, how to move through storms like birds on the wind. The aliens called it contamination, but the humans knew better. Earth wasn't just fighting for them. It was teaching them how to fight with it. And that terrified the invaders more than any weapon, because weapons could be destroyed. But this was evolution. On the front lines, alien commanders reported impossible events. Rivers rose against their bridges, sweeping tanks away. Thunderstorms struck only their formations while leaving human lines untouched. Entire forests shifted overnight, swallowing artillery emplacements. But the worst reports weren't about the planet. They were about the people. A captured alien scout described human eyes glowing faintly in the dark, like reflections of starlight. Entire battalions moved as one, without orders, reacting faster than any drilled army. Some soldiers walked straight through minefields, every step guided as if the ground whispered where to place their feet. The Empire's analysts tried to explain it as chance, coincidence, even mass hysteria. But inside their war councils, the highest voices began whispering a forbidden thought. What if Earth is choosing them? Because the pattern was clear. The longer the humans fought, the less they acted like isolated individuals, and the more they moved like extensions of the planet itself. And the Empire, for all its power, had no strategy for that. How do you fight a world that refuses to let its children die? Far above Earth, in the cold void of orbit, alien admirals argued bitterly. Some demanded retreat, warning that the longer they lingered, the more their fleets were caught in Earth's invisible web. Others demanded escalation, planet killers, star burners, weapons of extinction. But even as they spoke, their most terrible weapons began to falter. Missiles misfired, plasma cannons overheated. Ships lost power when they drifted too close to Earth's pull. It was no longer a battlefield. It was a crucible. And within that crucible, humanity was becoming something new. The Empire still told itself the war could be won. Numbers, machines, firepower, those had always been enough before. And against any other world, perhaps they would have been. But against Earth, every strength turned into weakness. Supply lines collapsed first. Convoys vanished in jungles where the canopy swallowed them whole. Deserts shifted overnight, burying crawler caravans in dunes that had not existed the day before. Even oceans betrayed them. Ships caught in waters that should have been calm were dragged beneath by waves that rose without warning. The alien commanders began to whisper what they dared not say aloud. The planet itself was against them. And yet, the humans were thriving. Civilians who once cowered in ruins emerged stronger than before. Villages became fortresses. Children ran through forests without fear, finding food where none should grow. Entire towns coordinated as though sharing one mind, anticipating storms before they formed, dodging patrols as if they had read enemy plans. The humans were no longer merely resisting. They were evolving. Some Empire soldiers deserted, unable to bear the terror of a world that bent reality against them. They fled into human lands, begging for mercy. Many did not return. The ones who did spoke in hushed tones of seeing things they couldn't explain. Humans moving with storm clouds, voices that echoed like the wind through stone, eyes reflecting lightning. The Empire called it superstition. But superstition doesn't collapse whole legions. In the War Council orbiting Earth, the admirals fought with words sharper than blades. "Exterminate the species," one demanded. "Burn their cities, salt their soil, let the planet choke on their ashes." But another voice trembled. "And what if the planet will not let us? What if by striking harder we feed its rage?" That silence that followed was heavier than any weapon. Because even they had noticed it, something in the numbers that made no sense. For every city they crushed, 3 more rose in resistance. For every human who fell, others grew fiercer. Their weapons grew cruder, simpler, but more effective. Traps, sabotage, storms, rivers turned against them. This was not war. This was survival on a scale no empire had ever seen. And though the invaders still had fleets, still had firepower, still had the arrogance of conquerors, an unease had begun to spread among them. For the first time in their long history of dominion, they asked themselves the question that gnawed at their pride. What if this is the one world we cannot conquer? The Empire had always believed in overwhelming force. If the enemy would not bow, then break them. If the planet resisted, then scorch it. And so, they launched their grand offensive. Every fleet ship rained fire upon Earth's surface. Every artillery battery lit up the skies. Forests turned to ash, oceans boiled at the edges, mountains shook with detonations meant to shatter continents. But when the dust cleared, Earth was not broken. The forests that had burned grew back overnight, green shoots pushing through ash before flames even cooled. Rivers they had poisoned rerouted themselves, carrying clean water as if guided by some unseen will. And the skies changed. The storm that followed was no storm of chance. It was vast, deliberate, almost designed. Winds ripped war machines from the ground and hurled them into canyons. Lightning found only alien equipment, never striking a human shelter. Their sensors failed to explain it. Their logic faltered. But the humans watching from the ruins whispered what the Empire feared. The Earth was angry. Then came the first undeniable blow. A fleet carrier, the size of a floating city, hung above the Pacific, its guns ready to wipe out what little resistance remained on the coasts. But the ocean beneath it shifted, not in waves, in movement. The sea itself rose like a living thing. A wall of water taller than mountains slammed into the carrier, not once, not twice, but again and again, as though the ocean had decided this ship did not belong. The vessel's engines screamed, its stabilizers fought, but nothing could resist the fury of an entire ocean turned against it. When it sank, dragging thousands of soldiers into the depths, there were no survivors, no wreckage washed ashore, only silence. The humans cheered, not because they had caused it, but because they understood. They were no longer alone. The Empire's admirals dismissed it as anomaly, a freak disaster. But the soldiers on the ground knew better. They had seen rivers flood only their camps, seen quakes split the earth beneath their tanks while leaving human shelters untouched. This was no coincidence. This was war. And for the first time in the history of the Empire, the war was not only against a people, it was against a planet. The humans had always called it Earth. But now the invaders began to call it something else, in whispers they dared not repeat aloud. The living world. The Empire's commanders gathered in their war councils, projecting maps of Earth over their shimmering holoscreens. But every time they marked a target, the world beneath shifted. Forests regrew before their satellites could capture the burn scars. Rivers carved new paths, cutting off supply lines. Even the weather seemed to conspire, erasing their progress with floods, storms, and freezing blizzards that appeared out of nowhere. "This is not strategy," one admiral growled. "This is madness. A planet cannot fight back." Yet the evidence mounted. An armored column rolled across the African savanna, engines roaring as they advanced toward a human settlement. But the ground betrayed them. The soil turned soft, vehicles sinking axle-deep as though the earth itself had swallowed their momentum. A stampede of elephants thundered out of the haze, not fleeing, but charging. Beasts that should have scattered instead crushed the column under tusks and sheer weight. In South America, jungle canopies closed ranks above drop zones. Paratroopers leapt from their carriers, only to be caught by vines that tightened like nooses, leaving them dangling and helpless until human militias finished the job. In the northern seas, fleets vanished beneath sudden ice. Ships that fired their weapons found their engines freezing solid, frost crawling across hulls faster than natural science could explain. The world was no longer a battlefield. It was a hunter. The humans knew it too. For the first time in history, they looked at their planet not as a backdrop for war, but as an ally. Soldiers prayed not only for victory, but for Earth itself to rise in their defense. And each day it did. Alien morale collapsed. "What are we fighting?" whispered a soldier before his commander executed him for cowardice. "This is not conquest. This is punishment." And whispers spread, carried from squad to squad, fleet to fleet. Perhaps the humans were never the true danger. Perhaps it was the world they came from. But deep within the Empire's high command, denial still reigned. Their emperor demanded results. They had never lost before, and they would not lose now. "Then we burn the world itself," the emperor decreed. "If it resists us, we shall scour it until nothing remains." But as their superweapons powered up, a quiet dread lingered. For if Earth truly lived, if it truly fought for its children, then what would happen when the planet grew angrier still? The Empire's fleets drew into formation, blotting out the night skies above Earth. Colossal ships, each larger than a city, lowered their weapons toward the blue-green sphere. "This planet has defied us long enough," the Emperor's voice thundered across the comms. "If nature itself dares resist, then let nature itself burn. Fire the cleansers." And the sky bled. Orbital cannons rained plasma upon the Earth's surface, carving molten rivers where forests once stood. Oceans boiled, vapor rising into choking storms. Cities trembled beneath the bombardment, their lights flickering as human resistance braced for the end. But as the Empire unleashed its fury, the world did not die. It shifted. Lightning split the heavens, not in random strikes but in precision, arcing upward into the fleet above. Storms swirled into targeted cyclones that hurled ships into one another. Where fire scorched, the Earth answered with fury. One fleet commander screamed as his cruiser fell from orbit, dragged down not by weapons but by gravity itself. The planet's pull grew stronger, twisting calculations, dragging ships from the sky like prey into the jaws of a predator. Still, the Empire pressed on, unleashing its superweapons, vast rods of kinetic energy hurled down to shatter continents. But as they streaked toward the Earth, the ground split open, swallowing the impacts into vast chasms that closed again as if nothing had struck. Their most devastating attack, the World Eater torpedoes, designed to hollow planets into dust, were swallowed by the sea. The Atlantic opened like a wound, dragging the weapons into its depths before sealing shut, leaving only rippling waves above. And as the weapons failed, something more terrifying began to happen. The Earth itself answered back. Volcanoes erupted not at random, but in perfect unison. Rings of fire encircling alien landing zones, drowning entire legions in oceans of molten rock. Earthquakes split open command centers, crushing armored divisions as if the ground itself hated their presence. To the humans, these were miracles. Survivors fell to their knees, whispering through tears, "The Earth protects us." To the Empire, it was madness made real. A planet should not think, should not fight, should not defend its children. And yet, here was proof written in fire and ash. Panic broke among the soldiers. "We are not at war with humans," they cried. "We are at war with a god." But in the Emperor's heart, denial still clung like rust. He would not retreat. Not yet. "No planet," he snarled, "no thing defies the Empire. If the Earth is alive, then we shall kill it." And with trembling hands, he gave the order to awaken their final weapon, the one they had sworn never to use on any world. The weapon that could unmake not just armies, but a planet's very soul. The Zorith High Command had run out of patience. Months of war had bled their forces dry. Entire legions had vanished in jungles that grew overnight, deserts that swallowed armor columns, and mountain storms that seemed to hurl lightning with intent. Soldiers no longer spoke of victory. They whispered of curses. Now, from the flagship Dreadmantle that circled Earth, the supreme strategist gave the order no Zorith dared imagine: unseal the Cataclysm Protocol, a weapon not meant for conquest, but extermination. The weapon was not a missile, nor a fleet. It was a series of orbital pylons, hidden for centuries, designed to burn a planet's crust and strip away its atmosphere. It was the kind of tool only desperation could unleash. To the Zorith, Earth was no longer a jewel to claim, but a nightmare to erase. The pylons descended through the upper atmosphere, glowing with ancient fire. Clouds parted. Oceans boiled beneath their radiance. The alien commanders declared, "Let the cursed planet die." But Earth did not die. The pylons struck soil, and instead of tearing the crust apart, they sank, groaning like harpoons piercing flesh. Then the ground shuddered. Across continents, fault lines opened, but not as the Zorith expected. They did not see tectonic collapse. They saw resistance. Roots thicker than starships lashed upward from beneath the crust, coiling around the pylons. Entire forests convulsed, their trees bending as if in pain, then surging with unnatural unity. Storm fronts collided into the descending fire, smothering their glow. The pylons were being digested. The Zorith fleet panicked. Sensors screamed. The planet was fighting back, not just passively, but actively. Every weapon turned against Earth only seemed to feed its fury. On the ground, human resistance fighters saw the event unfold, like the breaking of dawn. From mountains to coastlines, fissures glowed with deep green light. Cities thought lost flickered back to life with power from nowhere. And in the forests where battles had raged, soldiers swore the earth itself whispered, an ancient, thunderous voice that shook marrow. Enough! The humans fell silent. Even hardened veterans dropped their rifles. For the first time since the invasion began, they understood. They were not alone. Earth had awakened, and now it was choosing a side. The Zorith scrambled to regroup. Admirals barked orders to retreat their ground troops, to cut losses before the planetary anomaly consumed them. But for many, it was too late. Fields once muddy solidified into jagged stone, impaling armored walkers. Rivers shifted course in minutes, swallowing convoys whole. Above, the dread mantle itself trembled. The pylons tethered to Earth began to drag the colossal warship downward, as if invisible chains had wrapped around it. Systems shut down one by one, drained by some force no technology could repel. For humanity, the nightmare was no longer survival. It was witnessing a war beyond comprehension. Men and women stood atop ruins and burning tanks, staring into the glowing horizon, realizing their home was not just alive. It was vengeful. But in that vengeance lay a question. Would Earth spare them, its children, or judge them alongside the invaders? The answer was coming. And the galaxy would soon understand why Earth could never, ever be conquered. The Zorith once believed themselves eternal. Their fleets spanned galaxies, their archives stretched back millennia, their name inspired submission wherever it was spoken. But that illusion shattered the moment Earth decided to fight. From orbit, the dread mantle burned. Its colossal frame, once a symbol of Zorith domination, now hung bound to the planet like prey in a predator's jaws. The pylons that should have unmade continents were being drained dry, their energy pulled into the Earth, redirected through fault lines, rivers, and forests, until the planet itself glowed with terrible life. On the ground, humans advanced, not with superior weapons, but with momentum born of something greater than strategy. Wherever they moved, the land moved with them. Soldiers trudged through mud that hardened into stone beneath their boots, giving them paths across battlefields. Their fires never dimmed, for winds carried the smoke away from human lines and into alien camps. Even the night sky seemed to blaze brighter for them, as if the stars themselves watched. The Zorith fought with the fury of cornered predators. Orbital bombardments scorched cities, but the flames recoiled, bending back into their ships. Drones swarmed by the millions, only to collapse mid-flight when unseen forces tangled their circuitry. In desperation, Zorith generals authorized tactics once unthinkable, sacrificing entire divisions just to delay human advances. And still, the humans came. In the forests of what had once been Eastern Europe, a ragged brigade of farmers, mechanics, and children marched beneath a canopy alive with thunder. They carried scavenged rifles and sharpened scrap metal. Yet when alien walkers appeared, the trees themselves split apart, dropping entire trunks across their path. In Africa, a militia armed with nothing more than bows and stolen pistols charged into the desert. The sandstorm rose at their backs, engulfing the invaders and leaving only bones in its wake. In the Pacific, fishing crews rammed their boats into enemy landing craft, just as the ocean itself surged upward, dragging warships into trenches older than history. The world was not merely terrain. It had become ally, and humanity, once scattered and desperate, was now united. Not under flags or governments, but under survival. No leader commanded this war. No general directed the front. The entire species had become a single army, and the planet marched beside them. The Dreadmantle's crew screamed as their flagship was pulled lower, atmosphere beginning to claw at its hull. The supreme strategist issued frantic orders: sever the pylons, abandon orbit, retreat to the void. But the pylons would not release. Every attempt to detach was swallowed by the living Earth. The flagship had come to enslave a world. Instead, the world had chained it. And then, from the burning skies above, came the moment no historian, human or alien, would ever forget. The Dreadmantle, jewel of the Zorith fleet, cracked in half. Its spine, a structure longer than a city, snapped like brittle bone. Fire cascaded through its decks. Thousands of alien soldiers were flung screaming into the air, their bodies consumed before they touched the ground. The wreckage fell across continents. One half slammed into the Atlantic, boiling seas for miles. The other plummeted across Eurasia, breaking apart into a rain of metal and flame. The Zorith Empire's symbol of power was gone. And for the first time in living memory, the galaxy trembled. Because somewhere in countless outposts light years away, the story was spreading. An empire had tried to kill Earth, and Earth had killed them instead. But humanity knew it wasn't finished. The invaders still had colonies. Their fleets lingered in orbit. Their will to dominate remained unbroken. The war wasn't over. But the tide had turned so far it could never be reversed. Human soldiers climbed from the rubble and raised their fists to the burning sky. Across every battlefield, a single truth was shouted, not in one tongue but in all. "We are still here!" The Zorith survivors fled in terror, but their empire's doom had already begun. For a species that could awaken its very planet, no chain would ever hold them again. The final reckoning waited in the stars. The galaxy would later call it the day the sky broke. But for humanity, it was simply survival. The Zorith fleet, scattered and broken, limped back into the void. Their transmissions, once filled with threats and demands, were now screams, warnings, and desperate pleas for reinforcements that would never come. The Empire had been humiliated on live broadcast, its flagship gutted and hurled down like a stone from heaven. But humanity did not celebrate with parades or banners. They stood among ashes, among ruins of cities that would never rise the same way again. They buried their dead with quiet hands, and their silence carried more weight than any anthem. Still, word spread across the stars. In mining colonies where workers had long suffered under alien rule, whispers began, "If humans can resist, why not us?" On distant stations, slaves stole glances at the stars, imagining freedom. And in the deepest palaces of the Zorith elite, silence curdled into fear. The humans had not only defended their world, they had shattered the illusion that the Empire was untouchable. Earth itself had become a weapon. Rivers surging against invaders, forests crushing war machines, storms shielding their fighters. Yet the true weapon was never the planet. It was humanity. A species that would not kneel, would not break, would not vanish, even when the universe demanded it. The Zorith archives would later describe the humans as a paradox, too primitive to be dangerous, too stubborn to be defeated, too unified in desperation to control. They had looked upon death and refused to die. And so the empire that had ruled for millennia began to fracture. Not in one grand explosion, but in 1,000 quiet rebellions seeded by the story of a single planet that defied extinction. The humans did not seek to rule the galaxy. They did not seek conquest or glory, they sought only to endure. But endurance has a way of becoming legend. One day, far from now, scholars and storytellers across countless worlds would teach the tale as parable. They would speak of the proud empire that executed a human to show its power, and in that moment signed its own death warrant. They would tell of a planet that fought beside its people. They would remember the species that turned despair into defiance and defiance into victory. And they would know this: when humanity rises, even empires fall. If you enjoyed this story, make sure to like, share, and subscribe for more original HFY tales. And tell me, if you were one of those first humans on Earth during the invasion, would you have fought or would you have fled? Comment below. I'll be reading every response. Until next time, remember, when humanity rises, even empires fall.